So, first of all, apologies for my absence this week. It's been a very busy week, very hectic with lots of stuff happening. First of all, I have been working behind the scenes on what I think is going to be a few rather lengthy videos looking specifically at what kind of mother Jenn truly is. And that's actually taken up way more time than I imagined. I thought it would be the usual job of spending maybe a morning collecting clips and then recording in the afternoon. But I actually have so many clips that it's going to be at least a 2-part series, and in case you didn't guess, it's not looking favourable for Jenn. I've also been working on some FOIA requests. I'm aware of all the stuff coming out of the State Attorney's Office, and I can't afford to buy it from other creators, so I've just gone and put in my own FOIA requests. Touch wood, now that many people have already got the documents and videos, there'll be no charge for that. Going back to the I can't afford it. Why? Because I bought myself a puppy this week, which is the other reason I've been slightly absent. I have a little 12-week-old Chihuahua puppy who arrived at my place on Thursday, and he was actually not overly well Thursday, so a few mad phone calls back and forth from the vet, trip to the vet Friday morning, and he's completely turned around. He's heaps better, but I spent all of Thursday afternoon snuggling with this little dude. Friday morning was spent at the vet's. Friday was mostly spent with him. So I've been spending a lot of time on this little dude over the last couple of days. But like I said, he's now bright and chirpy and happy and ready to bounce around in the house and be one of the family. So it's definitely been a busy week. Now, in the meantime, I wanted to go back and look at an interview that was done a month or so back on another channel. So if you want to just listen to it directly, it's on Guilty of Crime. And it is a person claiming to be a former flatmate of Jenn's. I left it for a bit of time because obviously I didn't want to be, if it's an exclusive interview, I don't want to be taking views from a content creator. So I let it sit for a while, but I do want to have a look at it and address it and see if this person is, or if I believe this person is legitimate. Maybe she is, maybe she isn't. Jay says on her channel that she has confirmed that she's legitimate. I think I still have questions. I haven't listened to it all in full, but there were a few things that made me a little bit curious. So this video it will be broken up into parts, I think, because basically you have 2 sections to it. One section is the first video that Jay put out, where she had basically emailed this person and they had a conversation behind the scenes, because the individual said she didn't want to actually speak. She didn't want to be actually interviewed. She just wanted to communicate via email. So there was that. And then there was a follow-up video where she then actually came on and spoke and answered questions. So I think I will break it up into 2 parts. And if need be, I may do a follow-up video also where I compare the 2 different parts to this interview, or these 2 interviews. So this is apparently a female flatmate who also had a room in Juan's townhouse at some point in time. So mostly for this first one, you will have Jay explaining what she's been told by this person. And while I do feel uncomfortable when it is actually a creator talking, to be basically doing a reaction or an analysis, this is not her sharing her opinions, this is her sharing what someone has told her. So that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable with it. But I still think it's important information to go through, and we need to decide how credible it is and if there's anything worthwhile in it. So with that said, let's just jump in.
And we're going to start off with these answers, and then we're going to dig deeper. Now, I just talked to this person on the phone right before I got on here, and it's a she. So first of all, I want you to know some of the things I didn't know. Well, Jenn, besides being really drugged out, I'll tell you this right now. Jenn was at a mental hospital. She did check herself into a mental hospital. It's about an hour and a half away. I can't remember the name of it. If you're from Florida, it's something Peak. I'll get the name of it, but it's about an hour and a half from where she lives. She was, in fact, at a mental hospital, and it wasn't because she was hiding from the cops or lawyering up, although she did lawyer up. Someone says, why didn't the whole family jump in? I'm sure they knew. Well, listen to this. I've got questions for this person, and they've got answers for me.
Okay, so before we get ourselves too excited about, here we go, here's the truth, Jenn was in a mental health hospital after Maddie died, I just want to caution everyone. Remember, at this point in time, this woman we haven't even heard her voice. My big question too is, when you hear Natalie and Angelica talking in their interviews, it doesn't sound like they are overly close with Jenn. Sounds like it is that sort of flatmate relationship where I strongly suspect that while obviously Natalie, being Stephanie's best friend, probably kept contact to some extent after moving out of the townhouse, I would imagine that Angelica didn't look back. It doesn't sound like the sort of live-in relationship where everyone becomes best buds. They were all very much segregated, all in their very own worlds. So I do have to question how legitimate this person is and how they would be so certain of Jenn moving into going into a mental health hospital after Maddie was deceased, having been a former flatmate who hasn't lived with her for something like 4 years. Because especially given Jenn's whole thing of, I don't want to be out in public and I don't want people to know stuff, yada yada, I can't see Jenn as being someone who is going to contact all her friends and say, hey, guess what, I'm going into a mental health hospital now. And certainly I think it sounds like if this person is a former flatmate, then it's not like they have connections with other people in Jenn's circle. Their one connection would be Jenn. And I would imagine, based on what we know about Jenn and her family, that it would have been her and her family that would be the only ones to know about her going into a hospital. So this is when I already start questioning if this person is legitimate or if this is someone who has followed the case and has decided to pose as a flatmate, just to get attention. And we've seen it happen in so many cases. I mean, look at the fake Brian Laundrie girlfriend who came up with this whole scenario of, and she knew that his parents were paying for him to leave the country and all this crap. And then we find out that she has nothing to do with him, didn't know anything, and of course his remains were found. Same with the Kylie Rodney case. You have these teenagers coming forward claiming to have been at the party, giving information that when you actually look at it, based on everything else you know, doesn't quite line up. Maybe they were at the party, but they're not telling the truth. So, and I mean, even in this case, we had that H-Ghost guy from Reddit who claimed to be someone close to Maddie's family and started coming forward with these stories saying stuff like Maddie didn't like being called Maddie and wanted to be called Madeline, which we know now is complete utter BS. And claiming that they had been contacted directly by the state attorney and told that no, Maddie was not pregnant. Like, that's going to happen. Like, the state attorney's just going to randomly contact someone and say, no, this is the story. So we know that there are people who insert themselves. So straight up, when we consider the sort of relationship that this person would have had with Jenn, and this claim that Jenn has got into a mental hospital, straight up, it makes me question whether A, this is just a family member posing as a former flatmate, but they don't want the family to know it's them, or if it's just a con artist. Maybe it is a former flatmate, but I need convincing.
So, Grandpa, from her perspective, was very loving. Maddie used to sleep in the bedroom with Grandpa because she felt safe when Stephan Stearns was there. Okay. So imagine this. Let's picture this. We have Jennifer Soto living in the condo with the grandpa in one room, Maddie in the other room, and Stephan Stearns hadn't moved in yet. Stephan Stearns started to court, so to speak, Jennifer Soto. Now, I don't know if he knew that she had a kid, but they worked together both at Disney, and that's how they met.
Now, here's the thing. This person is supposedly a close enough friend with Jenn to know that she's in a mental health hospital. But she doesn't actually know how Jenn and Stephan met. Because in actual fact, Jenn and Stephan met when they were both working for Chris in one of his real estate companies down, maybe it was at Windermere, I'm not sure. I would have to actually look up the title for that old business. But I actually thought it was down Northport Way. Because I remember in interviews, Jenn talks also about having lived at somewhere that was just near Northport in 2020. But I remember her saying they basically met while she was working for... Now, she carefully avoided mentioning that it was his father's company, and it's only because people actually looked the company up and found the company listing, and they discovered that the company was listed under the name of Christopher Stearns. But they met, not while they were working at Disney. He only got the job at Disney 12 months before quitting the job at Disney and moving back to Northport. They met down at Northport or in that area, I think Charlotte. Someone let me know, I can't remember. But they met when Jenn was like a secretary for Chris's business and Stephan was going out doing appraisal photos or God knows what. I don't believe Jenn saying he was a real estate agent because BS. So we're getting misinformation straight up from this person. As for in terms of them living in the apartment with Grandpa and with Maddie in one room and Jenn in another room, Jenn said that Maddie only ever had her own room when they were living down at Charlotte, which is, I think, where they lived during COVID, and that Maddie didn't have her own room at Kissimmee. Now, maybe Jenn got it wrong, or maybe this person got it wrong. But the other thing is that before Jenn met Stephan, she was living in the townhouse with Stephan and the two girls and Juan. And I believe it was probably after that that she moved down to Charlotte or wherever and took up the job with Chris. Meaning that there's not a lot of leeway here, because we know that the grandfather moved out sometime after that to go on the road. It could be possible though. I haven't got a solid enough timeline there to lock that in and say it's not possible that Maddie slept in a bed with her grandfather. But it seems like an odd thing to me, given that we haven't heard it from Maddie or anyone else. I'm just curious. I would love to hear from someone in Jenn's family as to whether or not Maddie shared a bed with her grandfather.
We're friends. Yes, poor Maddie. Okay, so no excuses. I'm going to talk about what the roommate knew. Why didn't anyone jump in? Now the roommate tells me, and she agrees, everybody let Maddie down. The roommate didn't let Maddie down, and I'm not going to say that because she didn't know what was going on, but here's what she does know. Okay, so I asked her a list of questions. She sent me an email saying, your channel's amazing. I don't want to throw my name down. I don't want people getting mad at me. Maddie was a sweet, sweet girl. May she rest in peace. Now, this person is doing therapy right now and counseling because she has some sort of guilt feeling to this. She was there when Stephan Stearns was there. She was there when Stephan Stearns had 3 drawers. Now, Stephan Stearns stayed in Jennifer Soto's room. He had 3 drawers and he kind of moved his way in. He didn't let Jenn go to his house. He lived with his parents, but his room was filthy. Okay. It was not even habitable, filthy. So yes, mad respect to the roommate. And I hope nobody gets upset at what she says.
Now, these comments saying that the roommate herself is having counselling and she's traumatised by it and she feels guilt and everything, and we don't want people to get upset by what she says, feels very preemptive. It feels a lot like the Hidden True Crime interview with Chris and Deb, where there was a definite sense there that if you do a reaction to this video, then you're a complete utter asshole because you're basically picking on someone who's fragile. And I realise that people may criticise me for having a look at this flatmate, but if you are going to come forward and say that you are someone who knew these people, then you need to expect that there is going to be scrutiny on you. And I'm here for Maddie. So my goal is to make sure that we're hearing the truth for Maddie, and that people aren't coming forward with stories that maybe don't align simply to get attention for themselves, because that's not about justice for Maddie at all. So while I do recognise that if this person is legit and they may be in counselling, then perhaps they should have discussed this with their counsellor beforehand, as to whether or not they had the strength to come forward and do this interview. Because, like I said, in a big profile case like this, if you insert yourself, then there is a chance that you are going to come under scrutiny. Now, in terms of this person talking about what the family do or don't know or have or haven't done. I just want to point out what we've seen in the body-worn cameras when Maddie first went missing. And the way Jenn's whole family separated themselves from Jenn and Stephan. And I think that what we need to realise is that I don't think these are the sort of family members who would have popped around to the townhouse. I think whatever communication occurred with Jenn and Maddie, whatever interaction occurred with Jenn and Maddie, probably happened at Yolanda's house or at Stephanie's house. I would imagine that in terms of Yolanda and Jenn's step-siblings, that there would be an awkwardness about going to a house owned by Juan. Even if he wasn't living there anymore, it would still be his house. So I find it curious that she seems to have inferred that she has some sort of close connection with Jenn's family, because from what we know of her other flatmates, sure, Stephanie is best friends with Natalie, but even there seemed to be a separation there. We hear about Natalie texting Stephanie about her concerns with Stephan having Maddie in the room alone, and there was no response from her. I can't imagine Angelica having any real communications with Jenn's family. So I just find it curious that this person was supposedly a flatmate and is so close to Jenn's family as well, and has maintained this closeness with Jenn and her family after all these years.
Okay, Park Place Behavioral Center. Jennifer Soto has been in and out of mental health facilities most of her adult life. Okay, let me read these questions and then I will answer questions. Thank you to everybody so much for being here. Yeah, filthy like his heart and soul. He was a nasty pig, and Jennifer Soto went to his house and she actually cleaned his room for him because she wasn't allowed over there. So she met his parents. Obviously, it was a long time coming. Now,
okay, I have real problems with imagining the Jenn Soto that we know actually going to Chris and Deb's house and cleaning Stearns' room for him. The woman is a sloth. She spends most of her time doped out, not really doing much. And also, don't forget that at the time when they were first friends and he was still living with his parents, she was supposedly working for his parents. How would Jenn possibly have the energy to work and then go to the Stearns' house and tidy Stephan's room? And can we also acknowledge here that that was not how she met Stephan's parents? So claiming that she met Stephan's parents because she went there to the house to clean his bedroom for him is grossly inaccurate. She knew Chris before she knew Stephan because she worked for Chris. And I think if we dig a little bit deeper, we will see that while Deb had her poodles, that she was also involved somehow with these businesses of Chris's as well. Maybe she didn't meet Deb outside of... maybe she didn't meet Deb at the business, but saying that she met the parents because she went to tidy Stephan's room is so inaccurate. And I do believe that in one of the interviews, when she talks about them first meeting and him basically spending a lot of his time at her place. So there was certainly there's nothing from Jenn that we know of her talking about spending time at the Stearns' house. And it certainly raises questions for me to hear someone claim that Jenn went to his house and cleaned his room so she could go there. Especially given that at the time she had her own place, not at her father's house at that point, because that was when she was down Charlotte or wherever, working for Stearns' dad. So at the moment, I've got questions. I've got a lot of questions, and so far there's a lot here that's not adding up for me.
Roommate is still living with this guilt that she wasn't able to help Maddie, but she doesn't understand why nobody helped Maddie. And let me tell you the questions, and then I will read you the answers. Okay. So I got a message last night, and Jenny says, putting Maddie's tragic life aside, why didn't Jennifer Soto's family step in? As Jennifer Soto had mental health conditions, why didn't they call Maddie's father? Now, Jen, I asked her that today. Jenny, I asked her why they didn't call the dad. And you know what she said? She said that Jennifer Soto didn't even talk about the father. As a matter of fact, when she was there, the time frame she was there, and I'm going to answer that right now, was in 2018. She only visited her dad once when she was there in that entire year. I asked her that same question. Why didn't they call the dad? She barely even spoke about the dad. If the roommate knew, how did Jenn not know? Okay, I didn't say the roommate knew. Here's the roommate knows now. The roommate moved out, and then she got breaking news, folks, that Maddie was missing.
Now, I think, to be honest, this is one for Grish to look at and give us some answers to. So she says this person lived with Jenn in 2018. We know that Jenn and Stephan divorced in 2017. It sounds like Jenn and Stephan met roughly in 2017. So this is around the time that Jenn and Stephan had known each other for a year. I don't know how long Jenn worked for Chris for, so I don't know if Jenn had moved back up to Kissimmee at that point in time or not. But we know that Tyler was very absent as a father, so I could believe what she's saying here about Tyler not having only seen Maddie once that year. He himself admits that he was an absent father.
Her heart sank. She reached out to Jenn. She's talked to Jenn a couple of times through Instagram since this happened. Jenn was in a mental institution, but that's because she had recently and previously checked herself into a health facility because she has mental problems and she's drugged to the max. All right, let me read these questions. Number one, I'm asking for you guys. We really need to know the dates that Jenn started dating Stephan Stearns. This is my number one question for you guys, okay? And the answer is she started dating him in the beginning of 2018. We're in 2024, folks. That's 6 years. Okay, that's 6 full years that Stephan Stearns had access to Maddie. So this 2-year timeline is completely false. It's 6 years. It was in the beginning of 2018. She lived there from 2018 to 2019.
So I guess my follow-up question for this friend would be, as in, do you mean that they first met in 2018 and they first met and started dating in 2018, or that's when they started dating? Because we know from Jenn and Chris and Deb that they had been friends for some time first before they hooked up. So it is my understanding that they were friends for a year to 18 months before they hooked up. So 2018 could actually fit in terms of the timeline for when they were finally together, essentially.
She says, I met her around October of 2018. I'm not sure where, but I feel confident that Jennifer Soto and Stephan Stearns worked together. Okay, now listen to this. I didn't know this. Both of them had weight problems. You've seen Stephan Stearns fluctuate, correct? I've seen him fluctuate, and I've seen Jenn Soto fluctuate in her old pictures. They were both heavily overweight, and they both had gastric sleeves put in. So they bonded over the gastric sleeves. The roommate recalls her saying they were friends prior to dating. Now,
Okay, well, that's not new information to us either. Jenn mentioned that she had gastric sleeve surgery, and she also at one point in time mentioned that he had also. So when we're listening to a new person in this case and they're giving us information, we have to question, does the information sound credible? Does it sound logical if it's new information? If it's not new information, then we have to weigh up how much information are they giving us that's not new information. This is so far information that can be discovered from listening to interviews. Aside from the claims that Jenn had been tidying his room, which, based on Jenn's personality, I find that really, really hard to believe. There's also the mistaken notion that they were working at Disney together and that's how they met. So far, the only different information we're getting is the information about the mental hospital, which obviously we can't verify, and my question is, how is someone who is not even like a best friend of Jenn, how is she aware of this, given Jenn's whole secrecy, wanting to hide out after Maddie died? And why is it that she's so far given us 2 bits of information that are incorrect? Let's listen on.
I do imagine that Jenn started taking care of him and bonding with him over the weight loss. They were heavily overweight. They got the gastric sleeve, and then boom, they start dating. Okay. Did Jenn tell the roommate she went to the mental? No, Carrie, the roommate drove her several times to the mental institution. She didn't tell her anything. She took her there. She knows for sure. She went there and she drove her there. It was an hour and a half from her apartment. All of this stuff is verified. None of this is, I think, or whatever. I wouldn't put this out there. Okay. All right. Number 2.
Now, Jenn does admit in one of her interviews that she has been in a mental health facility in the past. So we know that is verified. As to how she was admitted, we can't verify that. It sounds credible that if you are living with someone, that they might be the person that drives you to a place like that. So you can take that either way. Although, that said, we have Maddie in the picture here, and I would imagine that maybe it would be something that would normally involve a family member. Now, in Australia, you can't just rock up to a mental health facility and say, I want to be admitted. You go through as far as I know, you either go to the emergency room if you're having some sort of episode, and then you are admitted to mental health, or I believe you go to your GP and then they do put everything in place for you. So it's interesting to hear that it's supposedly that's how it works in Florida, that you just drive someone up to a mental health facility and admit them. Let me know if that is indeed the case. I know there's several of you in here who have a really good knowledge of mental health, so let me know how that procedure works. We can't say either way whether we can verify this. like I said, so far I do have a few questions because there are some things that don't line up. We do know that Jenn was admitted to a mental health hospital previously, so maybe a flatmate did drive her there. But of course, my question would be, given that supposedly when this flatmate lived there, Jenn was dating Stephan, why was it the flatmate and not either Stephan or a family member? Especially since apparently Juan was still living in the apartment at that point in time.
I ask for you guys, how long has it really been that Stephan Stearns has been in Maddie's life? That's a question of the year. I think you'd be able to clear it up, so we'd absolutely know. You just give me a time frame when you know that he moved in. That would be great. Okay. So yeah, everybody's that's saying stuff. I'm verifying it. None of this is hearsay. It's hearsay from me because the roommate's afraid to talk to anyone. She's still having nightmares about what happened and that she wasn't able to help. Yes, lots of addictions, lots of drugs, lots and lots of drugs and lots of drugs and more drugs. Okay. Jennifer Soto was drugged up. So
Now, this is not me attempting to put shade on anyone, but until I hear it directly from the source, I was going to say horse, well, you know, horses with horse. Anyway, until I hear it directly from the source, it is hearsay. Even if it were Paula who were telling me these things, it would still be hearsay. I would still have to question it. So, you know, for me, I've seen enough of instances of random people inserting themselves into cases to know that it is super important to take these people with a grain of salt. I know there's 2 creators who covered the Kylie Rodney case who came out with these startling interviews which, in my honest opinion, they made up themselves. Either they made it up themselves or they were just completely scammed. One of those 2 creators had, I think, 2 or 3 of these random people who contacted her with these wild stories to do with Kylie's case. And they just sounded so not credible. And to me, it seemed pretty damn obvious that this creator was either making it up for herself or that someone was scamming her and she just wasn't really using any critical thinking whatsoever. So, when it is hearsay, while it remains hearsay, I will question it. It's easy enough, and like I said, this is no shade on Jay, but it's easy enough to say, I verified this information. But for me personally, unless I can see the receipts to show me that you have verified this information, then I'm still going to question it.
the roommate moved in the beginning, like I said, of 2018. She says, I know they were dating prior to that, but Stephan Stearns was not living at the house, but he would stay there often. He wouldn't allow her to go to his house, his parents' house, because his room was unsanitary. She had to go clean it. And that happened when she lived there. She was there. She listened to Jenn Soto say she was going to Stephan Stearns' house to go clean it because it was unsanitary. Okay. Now, Maddie, yes, you're right. Maddie did go October 2023. That's the last time she saw her dad. We're going way back, folks.
Okay, so in terms of Jenn and Stephan dating prior to 2018, that information from what we know is incorrect. Now, we know that Jenn was married to Stephan through till 2016. Now, what we've been told is that Jenn met Stephan in 2017, at which point she was living down south and working for Stephan's parents. And we were told that her and Stephan were just friends for the first 12 to 18 months, meaning that at the beginning of 2018, at the most, they had only been friends. They had not been dating. So, no, they were not dating prior to the beginning of 2018. If you go by what Jenn's parents are saying, then it was probably midway through 2018 that they actually started dating and that he started moving in with Jenn. So there's definitely a discrepancy here. And, you know, once again, going back to if this is a friend who is supposedly so close that she knows that after Maddie died that Jenn was put in a mental health place, wouldn't she also know that prior to 2018 they weren't dating, they were just friends?
We're in 2018. One time out of between 2018 and 2019, Maddie visited her dad. This roommate met her dad, but only once. He wasn't even mentioned around the house. It was just Stephan Stearns. Stephan Stearns was there. He pushed his way into the house. He moved his way into 3 drawers and he stayed there. You guys are going to get mad in a little bit here. Just get ready to be mad, but don't shoot me. Don't shoot the messenger. Yeah, 2018, 2019, folks. Joyce is correct. Number 3 question. Another question I have for you is, did you personally interact with Stephan and what'd you think of him? Okay. All right. Yeah. Red flags from the beginning. I agree. I did interact with Stephan Stearns personally. He was very strange. He painted figurines and was kind of quiet. We didn't interact much, but we didn't have too much in common. I would hang out with Jenn if he wasn't there normally. Their door was closed a lot with all 3 of them hanging out in the room. All the rooms were upstairs. There was Jenn, Jenn's dad, Juan, and Maddie, and the roommate was there. The roommate would always leave her door open because she was trying to watch out for Maddie. Some gut feeling of hers must have kicked in. She didn't like having a man in the house with a little girl. She didn't know at the time why, but she knows that she left her door open. Now
Here's the thing with hearsay information. You can't be certain that the person relaying the information is in fact relaying what they heard. Now, here we're being told that all of them lived upstairs in the townhouse, but in actual fact, the master bedroom that was downstairs was Juan's bedroom. He did not live upstairs. So maybe, I think in this instance, it's possibly a misinterpretation. But we know, we have that as factual information, that Juan actually lived in the master bedroom downstairs. And then when he decided that he was going to go hit the road, Jenn moved into the master bedroom. As for Stephan being weird and painting figurines, that's one of the biggest bits of information that's been shared around since the beginning of this case. So that's certainly nothing new that we know. As far as them being in their room with the door closed, that's quite plausible when you consider the fact that, from what we've been told, because it was Juan's apartment, the downstairs was essentially his realm. So that wasn't a common area downstairs in the living room or anything. That was his apartment. So for people living upstairs, the only place where they had privacy or where they could just, their space was in their room. So if you are sharing a house with people who are not family or not close friends, then yeah, if you are the sort of person who keeps to themselves a bit, then you probably would have your door shut quite often. I know I've never house shared, but I think if I were to have someone even just staying with me for a while, even if it was one of my friends just staying with me for a while, I would probably close my bedroom door when I was in there. If I was sharing a house with someone, and I was hanging out in my bedroom, then I would probably close my bedroom door for privacy. I guess the question I have from this is, if this is the case and he was gradually moving into Jenn's room with Maddie while Juan was living there, was Juan okay with that? And presumably the other room was empty, so wouldn't you as a grandfather be insisting that if your daughter is going to have some guy in her room with her, that your granddaughter needs to have her own bedroom away from that? It makes me question, if this is true, it makes me question why a grandfather would allow that to happen. So I certainly would have questions from Juan with regards to this kind of arrangement. If he was aware of it, why did he allow it?
I'm still answering this question that I gave. Occasionally, I would hang out with all three of them, but they were in the room a lot. Stephan Stearns pinged on all the kids' hobbies, folks. All these little figurines and video games. They were both big homebodies, Jenn and him. Jenn was a lot on the mental health meds and was filing for disability at the time. Her father, Juan, was pretty much supporting her, hence why he bought her a condo. Also, she got it after I moved out. So after this roommate moved out, Jenn got disability. Yes, she was still working at Disney enough just to not trigger the disability, okay?
Okay, first of all, we know that Juan did not buy the condo for Jenn. Juan actually owns the condo. In terms of saying that Jenn was still working at Disney enough not to trigger disability, we know Jenn didn't start working at Disney till after 2020. She makes it quite clear when she talks about them living down near Northport in 2020 during COVID, that she wasn't working at the time. She didn't have a job at the time. She had worked for Chris. She got fired by Chris. And then it's my understanding that she didn't work for quite some time, and she hadn't been working prior to COVID, and she wasn't working during COVID. Meaning that she did not start working at Disney till sometime after 2020. So no, in 2018, she was not working at Disney. She was not working just a little bit at Disney to try and not trigger her disability payments. So that is actually incorrect. I definitely have some reservations about this individual who is claiming to have been a flatmate. Now, if this person is listening, then by all means, feel free to contact me. I am a very cynical person. I do need receipts for things like this. What would I need in terms of receipts? Well, I would be wanting to see photos of you and Jenn together. I would want to be seeing some proof of these things that you are telling me. Because so far, the information we're getting is stuff that's been shared already in this case, and things that so far we know are incorrect.
So this is roommate says I hung out with Maddie, and when I was home, my door was always open to some degree. Per the records, it seems as though the SA was very shortly after I moved out. I moved out towards the end of 2019, and that's when the pictures started coming in June and July. Pictures and videos, okay? I thought this, oh my God, I thought I lost this channel forever. I'm so glad you won. Oh, yeah. All right. All right, so I'm making sure I let you guys know what's going on. I made sure I vetted it. I talked to this lady. By the way, Jenn Soto is bisexual, if that means anything to you. She is confirmed to have dated women, dated men. She's bisexual. She's openly bisexual.
Okay, so we did actually hear from Natalie that Jenn was bisexual, but to be honest, who cares? That's her preferencing. It doesn't have any bearing on this case as far as I'm concerned. Now, apparently this flatmate moved out at the end of 2019. That's problematic for me because we know that when COVID hit, Jenn and Stephan were living in an apartment down near Stephan's parents' place. So they weren't even, and I mean, in Australia, it was February when we had our first lockdown. And it's from memory, I think COVID hit the United States a bit earlier than it did in Australia. So if she left at the end of 2019, then did Jenn and Stephan up and move out at exactly the same time and move south? It's possible, but it's certainly interesting knowing that Jenn and Stephan weren't living in the townhouse during COVID.
If you see any of her pages or anything, she might have that on there. I don't know if that means anything to you, but she is. All right. Now, that was my number 3 question. I have 10 questions here. Number 4, did you ever notice that he was interacting with Maddie quite a bit? For instance, he was giving her a lot of attention, maybe in the beginning to earn her affection. The roommate says he was always doing something that had to do with things that wouldn't appear to me as adult activities, besides smoking, his vape, or cigarettes. Jenn had her medical marijuana card. It was always video games for him, painting figurines, or watching TV. She says, I didn't ever go out with the 3 of them, ever. She was a pastry chef in Disney Springs. So when I wasn't at work, I was at home, mostly unless visiting family or friends. Okay? So you guys, this is the first time I've got 657 people in chat. Please hit that like button, guys. I can't get people reaching out to me if I'm not in the algorithm.
Again, things don't add up for me here. So if this person was a pastry chef at Disney Springs, then she would have had to have known that in 2018 and 2019, Jenn didn't work for Disney. So why claim that Jenn was working for Disney and that Jenn met Stephan working for Disney? We know also that Stephan only worked for Disney for a year. He worked there until the end of 2023. So he basically worked there from sometime in 2022 through to the end of 2023. 1 year. So he wasn't working at Disney at that time. If this one was a pastry chef, then she would know that Stephan didn't work there at that time. And in terms of saying, well, you know, I never went out anywhere with them, again, you never went out anywhere with them, and yet you are still apparently so close to Jenn that you know that she booked herself into a mental health hospital. Yes, we all know that Stephan was into lots of immature things, and so far she's still not given any new information. Now, maybe I'm going hard on this person, but I'm just struggling because of the things that don't add up in her narrative.
Okay, so please, I want to do more of this. I want to bring the roommate on. I might just like black her out or use her voice. Okay, number 5. What did you think of him after you got to know him more? Honestly, she says, I didn't get to know him. He was not someone I would ever hang out with. I was cordial, but did not spend a lot of time with him. Listen to this. She says the air felt lighter when he wasn't there. If he wasn't there, or he was either wasn't there, or was gone, or was just away, the air was just a lighter. Thank you for loving my hair. Smash that like button, guys, if you like my hair or anything I'm talking about. Okay, so the roommate, again, don't shoot the messenger. We have some stuff coming up that you might not agree with, but this is this person's perspective. All right. So was Stephan Stearns, was he affectionate towards Jenn Soto? Like ever? Was he ever affectionate towards her, guys? That's what I wanted to know. These are my questions. You guys can always put questions and I'll ask her. You guys email me. Let me put my email down here. And well, it's out the bag now. It's a she. She's happy to tell me anything I want to know. Okay. She did not see them being affectionate, to be honest, besides calling each other not names. I don't know what that means, but to be honest, besides calling each other not by their names, he really spent most of his time playing video games or doing something that pertained to whatever game or painting figurines. So she didn't see any affection or anything like that. There was just nothing of that sort. Okay.
Okay, I've got questions with that. First of all, if Jenn and Stephan were always in their room with the door shut, how does this flatmate mate actually know that that's what Stephan was doing? In terms of showing affection, yeah, it's quite possible. I know people who, as couples, will not show affection towards each other when they're in company with other people, and they keep it as a private thing between them. But the other side of that is that we've heard from Deb Stearns that when Stephan and Jenn went to stay with her, and she had Maddie watching Disney in the living room area or sleeping with her, that she was doing that to give Jenn and Stephan alone time. So clearly, they were doing something together. And in terms of this new unredacted interview from the 28th that has now been released, I haven't watched all of that yet. I watched some of it on Paula's channel. I will go through it when I've got my own version, so I don't have to stop and wait for other people's commentary. But Paula did mention that Jenn had said that even after they broke up, they were still affectionate towards each other in front of Maddie. So it's just interesting to hear this from this person. Maybe they weren't affectionate in front of other people and only in front of Maddie, or maybe this person just doesn't know Jenn as well as she claims that she does.
Number 7. Is there anything unusual that you would say about him? Did you ever get a gut feeling that you didn't like him, or he didn't come off normal? Anything like that? All right, great work. I think he used Jenn. Yeah, and I think Jenn was heavily drugged for years. No, that is not not an excuse, but either way, it's just the facts, folks. It's just the facts. All right. We haven't even got to that yet. Okay, so she said he is unusual, and I noticed that right away he's still doing and playing childlike things. It struck me as a bit odd. I know we have our own hobbies, but this guy was extra level. She had a talk with Jenn about him, and she told me he was shy and that he was overweight when they met. So he just was in his shell and didn't want to interact with her or be social. So that's why she thought he was odd. She did have a talk. Should check out the grandpa as well. Okay, we haven't even got to the grandpa, guys. All right.
Okay, that's really neither here nor there. That's nothing that we can verify or disprove. I will say I find it interesting that someone who was not Jenn's best friend, not a family member, felt that they could actually discuss this guy with Jenn, because well, heck, I mean, I can remember when I was in my 20s and my best friend was dating a guy that I didn't approve of. She still to this day doesn't know that I did not approve of that guy. I breathed a huge sigh of relief when the relationship was over. But even, even with your best friends, unless it's a situation where you can see that there is perhaps a DV situation going on, most people aren't going to turn around and just say, oh, your new boyfriend, he's just a bit strange, I don't like him. That's usually a surefire way to end a friendship pretty damn quickly. And when you're not actually a best friend, it's an odd thing to do.
So she said, yeah, she talks about the grandpa in here. All right. So she also says here, she really couldn't give me an answer on that. Jenn couldn't give her an answer as to why she kept Stephan around. He wasn't bringing anything to the table. She was paying for everything. He didn't have a job and he was just a pig. All right. So,
Okay, that sounds almost like a direct quote from one of Jen's interviews. Can we just acknowledge what's just been said here? So, this supposed flatmate is claiming that Jenn and Stephan met at when they were working at Disney together, which we know that is not the case. And now she's turning around and saying that, well, Stephan didn't have a job. Well, yeah, that would be more accurate. But you can't turn around and claim that he was working at Disney at the time that Jenn and Stephan met. And then in the next breath turn around and say he didn't have a job. As far as I know, no, he didn't work after working for his father up until when he got the job at Disney. But he did not get that job at Disney till way after 2018 and 2019. So now she's actually contradicting herself, which is a huge red flag to me. Right now, I'm leaning towards this particular flatmate being someone who has basically followed the case and is answering questions based on having watched various interviews and is actually not someone who knows Jenn.
she says, I'm a few years older than Jenn. And then she says, her father, Juan, also lived there while I was living there. And he stayed in the room. So he was in the room downstairs. He's a nice guy, funny, and respectful. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, I correct you guys. He's Puerto Rican. Jenn is Guatemalan and Puerto Rican. So when I said that, it was a correct assumption that Jenn is Puerto Rican. Her dad's Puerto Rican, and he went back to Puerto Rico. Okay.
Okay, I'm just wondering how a van lifer actually travels to Puerto Rico. Because we know that he basically left the townhouse for van life. We also know that that occurred after 2020. The townhouse was actually put on the market in 2020 and then taken off the market after that, which I believe is when Jenn left wherever it was that her and Stephan were living down south and moved back into the townhouse because one wanted her to move in because he was heading off in his van. So, unless he went for a holiday to Puerto Rico, it's my understanding that he lived in the townhouse up until the point in time when he decided to become a van lifer. We've seen his van set up. We've heard that from various sources, including neighbours. And I think those neighbours were your typical nosy old couple who had a pretty good handle on what was going on in their neighbourhood.
So she liked him. She said that he loved his grandchildren. You saw the video of him paying attention to his grandbaby. He was talking about going back to Puerto Rico while I was living there, so I assume he did right after I left. I did not get any bad feelings about her dad, Juan. Maybe subconsciously, I always kept my door open or hung out with Maddie because I don't trust men around kids. You hear that, folks? Yeah, that makes my skin crawl. The air was lighter when he was not there. That made my skin crawl too. Absolutely. All right. So, number 8. Do you know if he moved in fairly quickly after meeting Jenn? I'm trying to get a feel for how this guy moved in on her and what. Yeah, Jenn's dad was a vet. Yeah, he was. Agreed. There's a whole grooming process, and I said it from the beginning, even though I don't think Jenn is innocent of anything. I think that he groomed Maddie and that he also groomed Jenn, and he did take advantage of her mental health, anxiety. She had anxiety, ADHD, PTSD, and she was heavily, heavily medicated at night. All right. So no excuses. No, I don't think he moved in fairly quickly, but he certainly stayed there most of the time. But he had a few drawers in Jenn's room. I think the move-in happened, but maybe after Juan went to Puerto Rico. So he waited until the roommate moved out, and he waited until Juan moved out.
Again, that is somewhat problematic because, first of all, this flatmate was basically inferring that Stephan was there all the time in Jenn's room. But don't forget, Stephan's parents live 3 hours away. So if Stephan was still living with his parents all that time, he wouldn't have been there all the time in the townhouse. Also, in terms of him not moving in there till after Juan moved away, well, that would make it well after 2020 because we know that they weren't living in that townhouse in 2020. And yet, we know that they were living together down Northport Way during 2020, during COVID. And the information that we were given from Deb and Chris was that they basically got together about a year to 18 months after they met. So if they'd met in 1717, then my understanding would be that they were living together in at least 2019. So there's a few things just not adding up here. Maybe one did go on a holiday to Puerto Rico, but we know that he didn't actually go to live there or anything because we know that he did the van life thing. I'd really love to have Grish look at this timeline and compare it with his own timeline and his research that he's done, because I know he's got a lot more information that he hasn't shared publicly, and I think he's got a really solid grasp on Jenn's timeline in terms of where she lived and where Stephan lived. And I suspect that he would also have questions about what this supposed flatmate is saying.
And then the pictures started happening. The videos started happening, folks. Okay? As she moved out, he wasn't living there when she was. Jenn was not working when she lived there. So the person that lived there paid rent. Juan paid for the apartment. And Stephan and Jenn pretty much stayed home all day and hung out in the room most of the time. They weren't very active. They were overweight. And Stephan Stephan's a pig. He basically just groomed whoever he could. 866 people in chat. Please hit that like button. Yes, dark people bring dark energy. Sage that. Exactly. All right.
Again, it doesn't appear to me that the timeline given by this supposed flatmate actually matches with what we know. And once again, she's gone from Stephan and Jenn working together at Disney to neither of them were working.
Next question. Is there any other information that you saw as a roommate that might throw red flags? Maybe you said something to Jenn and she ignored you. Okay, don't get mad at me. Jenn had a lot of mental health issues and mental health problems, and she was on a shitload of meds, guys, like bottles and bottles and bottles of meds. She went every week because she was, I don't know if they call that indigent or whatever, Medi-Cal. I don't know what they call that in there. Thank you so much for the super chat. There might be more in here. There's new members and a super chat. I appreciate you. There's 900 people in chat. Please hit that like button. I'll keep getting more information for you folks. All right. So Jenn had lots of mental health problems, was on a shitload of meds. She went every week to go get her meds. She went to a clinic. She was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, ADHD, depression, anxiety, and the list goes on. But she wasn't going to a psychiatrist or a psychologist. It was one of those free places, you know, the ones in Florida where you can just go get medication. It was one of those where you get free meds and they give you rounds. I told her I wasn't the biggest fan, but that's not my, sorry, hit the microphone. That's not my relationship. And I asked if she really wanted someone who was basically a freeloader besides his mommy's money. She said he was looking for a job. Yeah, indigent.
Now, according to Natalie, what we know is that Jenn was struggling to get a balance with her meds, and that she was basically changing meds quite often, trying to get the right fit, essentially. So yes, a person could perceive that as someone basically having a lot of medications. Again, though, this is something that could be interpreted from multiple sources, including Jenn herself. So we've heard from Jenn about what drugs she was on. We've heard from Natalie about Jenn being on various drugs and trying to balance them and get them right. And we've heard from Deb the accusation of Jenn being a druggie. So yes, maybe she did go to these free clinics, and given what we know of Jenn, that seems to be quite possible. Still not overly verifiable. This is possibly the first bit of new information that we have so far from this flatmate. It'll be interesting to listen to the second half of this, where we actually hear this flatmate talk themselves, because then we'll be hearing it directly. But yeah, I have questions.
Yeah, there are free places in Florida. There's a lot of places that get busted in Florida because they give stuff out like that, people. So yeah, there is. And she did take her there. I promise. She told me she would give me the location. And I said, you don't need to do that right now. I'm not trying to get the location. I don't want people stalking people. So 970 people, 935 in chat, guys. Don't forget, state funded mental health care facilities. And she took like 15 different pills, guys. All right.
Hang on, so this person claims that they didn't approve of these particular free clinics, and yet now she's saying she's the one who drove Jenn to them? Doesn't that sound a bit odd to you? And as for being on 15 different medications, you wouldn't survive that. And I would imagine that even these free clinics would have to be responsible to the extent of finding out what other medications a person was on before prescribing additional medications. It just sounds like an impossibility for someone to be on 15 different medications. Maybe over a period of time from changing from one medication to the next, but that's not the way I took this. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm still not convinced of this flatmate.
Last question, and then my dog's yelling, but I'm not done. I'm going to play a video for you that says, is Jenn going to be a witness or is she going to be charged? All right, next question. And then I can answer some. Oh, my dog's mad. All right, number 10. Here's the question I'd like to ask you now. Are you still friends with Jenn? And did you find her to be a loving and attentive mother to Maddie? Maybe she really did miss all of it and the signs because she was working a lot. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she was taking too much medication. All right, here's the answer. And again, I'm not can I share? Please do share my live, folks. Yes, absolutely share my live. Yeah, Stern might have been making money from Telegram. And hello, Victoria. Everybody hit that like button. We're at 975. So let me answer this last question and then I'll put that video and get my dog. He's yelling at me. Okay. She said no. Not really friends. She's not really friends with Jenn. She's talked to her a couple times on Instagram. She said I would check in and see how her and Maddie were doing via Instagram. When I would see a photo every now and then, imagine the shock that happened when I saw her missing on Instagram. She was and is still heavily medicated. I have 1,007 people in chat, folks. Hit that like button, please. All right. Then I'll get more people wanting to do interviews and coming on here. All right. The dog's like, Mama. I will say okay, God, don't get mad at me here. She says, I will say that she was a loving and attentive mom. When I was living there, she always took Maddie to school, or her grandpa did. And one of them always picked her up. So that's a telling sign, guys. That day, Stephan Stearns did it. She said she always did it. And I talked to her on the phone. No mistake here. They always did that. Okay. And quite possibly there were signs after I moved out. I don't think he did anything while I was there. And maybe because no one ever knew when I'd be home, he had more of an opportunity to get caught. But I don't think she did anything sinister. God, I hope not. I hope I'm right, she says.
Okay, it will definitely be interesting to listen to the second half of this, where we hear this person speak. And I will say that one is a pre-recorded one, so we don't have the interruptions of, please hit like, we've got this many people listening. Which, no criticism of that. It's a live stream. People do that. But this person says that they were, not really still friends with Jenn. They've spoken. Basically, they're essentially saying that since they moved out, the only contact they've had with Jenn has been checkups with Jenn on Instagram. So it's not like they were close. And yet this person claims to know that Jenn was once again admitted to a mental health facility. Like I said, I don't think Jenn is going to share that information with just random people, given that she was doing her best to hide out from the world when Maddie was missing and after Maddie was missing. So I'm just not buying this soggy bread at all. She also refers to, in terms of who took Maddie to school and picked her up, and she said it was always Juan or Jenn. Where does Yolanda and Yolanda's husband fit in there? Because we know that around the time, well, at least in the last year or so before Maddie went missing, that there were times when Maddie would walk to Yolanda's after school. There were times when Stephanie would take Maddie to and from school. We also know that Yolanda's husband would, on occasion, pick up Maddie a little ways down the road from the school, after school. So to hear that it was always Jenn and Juan, maybe that was the case before Juan moved away, I don't know. But it's just curious that this is different from the information that we have, given that Stephanie only lives around the corner from Jenn. Wouldn't you expect to hear, oh yeah, and Stephanie also used to take Maddie to and from school? So yeah, there's things just not adding up here for me. And I would need something more to believe that this person is credible.
But that's not in her normal nature. From when I know her, she loved Maddie. That I do know. I don't know when Juan moved, but I would bet that Stephan Stearns waited for him to move out. He was retired and would go to the movies and walks and stuff. He probably let it all out after he left. Listen to this. The bedrooms were upstairs and they were all very, very close. Jenn, Maddie, and I all had bedrooms upstairs, so I don't think he had the ability to do anything when there was always someone at home.
Well, we know that's not true too, because the night that he did whatever he did to Maddie, both the flatmates were home in their rooms. Yes, the rooms are close together, but there was a lock on Stephan's room. So, yeah, I mean, I would imagine that you would expect people to hear things going on in the other rooms. Unless, of course, the child that was the victim was drugged. And from some of the information we have, it sounds like that may have been his approach at times, and maybe that was his approach when he needed things to be quiet. I don't know. But we know that they can backdate it to 2020. And to be honest, with someone like Stephan, I highly doubt that it just started then. I would imagine that things had been going on right from the very beginning. So that brings us to the end of that part. The next section is actually when this person was actually speaking over the phone with Jay. And I'll do that in a separate video tomorrow. To be quite honest, right now I'm not convinced of the legitimacy of this person. Maybe they were a flatmate for some period of time, but I would say if they were, that they probably had very little interaction with Jenn and Stephan, because it appears that they have a lot of inaccurate information, and they just don't appear to really know Jenn all that well. There's not a lot of new things that have been introduced, and the new things that have been introduced connect with things that we already know. So we know that Jenn spent time in a mental health hospital. This person claims that she was the one that drove Jenn there. Well, that's not something we can verify, but that's something that you can easily add to a narrative, basically working with information that you've been given. In terms of Jenn got her meds from a free clinic, once again, not something that we can verify, but we can also say, well, we know that Jenn was on all sorts of medications, so it's not hard to then come up with an additional story as to how she got those medications. Now, I don't know if I'm just being a bit too critical here, but there's a lot of things here that don't seem to connect up. The dots just don't connect for me right now. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this. Do you believe this person? Do you believe that they are a former flatmate? Or do you think that they are someone who is basically just trying to insert themselves into the case to get a bit of attention? Very interested to hear your thoughts on this. So thanks for listening. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. Also, hit the like button and definitely leave your comments below. Let me know your thoughts on this. Thank you, and I'll catch you in the next one.